In this video, I want to discuss the importance of doing a 2,000-hour engine inspection. And I know some of you are thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, it kind of comes from my aviation background. I used to do 2,000-hour inspections on my aircraft, and I did it. Why? To keep me alive. Had to do with reliability. Had to do with that airplane not crashing into the jungle. And that's pretty much what this type of inspection is for a car. I'm going to call it the 2,000-hour reliability inspection because that explains a little bit better what I'm talking about here. There are really 3 times when you want to do this. One is right after you buy one of these older Mercedes-Benzes. You'll want to do this type of inspection. Another reason will be when the car gets between about 100 to 120,000 miles. Seems like at that period, a lot of things start wearing out. And as a side note, you'll find this very interesting. You know, if you're driving down the road at 60 miles an hour, and you multiply that times 2,000 hours, that's 120,000 miles. So you see, there are some similarities between aircraft maintenance and automotive maintenance. The final reason you would want to do this, of course, is if you're going to be taking a long trip. And I want this car to be able to take me reliably to California and back. So I'm going through it. I'm going through the engine, a lot of different things on the engine to make sure that it's going to be reliable, won't break down. And you really want to focus on things that have bearings. You want to focus on belts and hoses. You want to focus on, electronic ignition items like coils, wires, spark plugs. These are the things that can cause problems, including some sensors. Believe it or not, some sensors, particularly on these newer engines, can cause you to be very stranded, okay? So we're going to use the example of this M113 V8 in this S500 here, and then very similarly, the 6-cylinder M112, and then even these things apply to other older engines as well. So I'm going to go back, show you some of the things I've done. I'm kind of wrapping this up now. I'll be replacing a crank position sensor for reliability issues. There's nothing wrong with the sensor, but I will be replacing that a little bit later this afternoon. And I won't cover everything in this video. That'd make a really long video, but I'm going to hit some highlights. And then at the end of this video, I'll go ahead and put some links in the show more description below, taking you some other YouTube videos I've already done that talk about this type of reliability inspection. During your 2,000-hour inspection, one of the things you want to do is remove the cover on the engine. Give it a really good look over for loose vacuum hoses. Any kind of problem with any rubber plastic parts. I've already replaced these breather hoses. When I first inspected the car at 104,000 miles, these were all hard. A couple of them are cracked. But I'm looking at this again, particularly for oil leaks. This is important on the valve covers and around the valve cover areas. And I'm looking at a little bit of oil right here that is seeping out of this breather cover. And breather cover oil leaks at 100,000 miles or above are pretty common on these V8 and V6 Mercedes engines. Pretty tricky to get these leaks fixed properly. You have to use the correct sealant and you have to use the correct preparations for the parts. You're going to end up doing the job, and a year from now they're going to be leaking again. So if you have a Mercedes and you have these breather cover leaks, you want to check out my kit on the website. I have the proper sealant and I have complete video instructions that come with it on how to remove these and correctly prepare them and seal them up so they won't leak. Another thing that's very important to check at the 2,000-hour inspection and service are the front engine belt-driven accessories. These include the alternator, the AC, the water pump. We have belt tensioner pulley, idler pulley. And over here we have the electric fan. All these things can start to wear out, particularly the bearings in them. And this will usually occur or begin to occur when you start hearing little extra noises when you have your car at an idle. You'll hear a rumbling, or maybe the noise has gotten louder when the engine's running at idle. And so is the case with this S500. Just recently, a noise volume picked up in the front of the engine, particularly when the AC was turned on. So I decided, okay, it's time to do the inspection. And to do this, you really need to remove the serpentine belt. And I checked all the pulleys. You can spin the various pulleys.
Twist the pulley up like you're looking at inspecting the pulley.
You can pick up the sound of a worn bearing. And then also also, in testing this, electric driven fan here, I found this was the real culprit. This is the unit that had the majority of the noise that I had been hearing over the last few weeks. So I'm going to kind of get the camera in here and show you the sounds of these up close, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to isolate a problem with an electric fan like this, because this is a belt-driven fan. So it actually has a motor mounted here with a belt that drives the fan here. So you have actually two areas of pulleys, bearings that could cause problems and create the kind of noises I'm talking about. Here are the old parts that I just removed from the front of the engine, and here are the new replacement parts. So we're going to compare them, particularly in the sound of the bearings. This is the idler pulley. This is one of the common ones that wears out and creates a whine noise. Let's see if you can hear the bearing as I spin it. Okay, you can hear that rattling noise in that bearing. Notice how freely it spins. Now let's take a new one. See, it's got so much grease and packed the bearing, it won't even freely spin. Of course, it's not making any noise at all. This is the belt tensioner pulley, and this is another one that will start making noise at and around 2,000 hours. Notice if I just spin it slowly, it doesn't sound too bad, but watch when I pick up the speed. And look at how it just keeps spinning and spinning. And that's a really good indication that that bearing is dry. There is no grease inside. So this has probably got a few more miles, but why chance it when you can put a new one on and go another 2,000 hours. So here's the new one we're going to replace it with. Notice when I spin that, it won't even spin up. And of course, there's no noise at all. So those are the two problems that we found on the belt-driven accessories. Now let's talk a little bit more about this electric fan motor. On the electric fans that have a separate motor and are belt-driven, you're going to have to take it apart to determine whether the noise is coming from the bearings in the fan or coming from the bearings in the motor. Notice the small serpentine belt that's used to drive this fan. If I tip the fan up and spin this, it makes a little noise, but I don't hear any excessive bearing noise. Now let's take the motor, and I'm going to power the motor with a 12-volt booster that I have here. And let's see how quiet this motor sounds. Oh, listen to that. Have any of you heard a similar noise like that in the front of your engine? Well, it's obvious that it's the motor bearings. So I'm going to have to go on a hunt, because if you buy a new fan from Mercedes-Benz, it's only sold as one unit. I only need the motor. And I'm going to warn you, be very careful buying these used like on eBay, because you may just inherit another fan that makes the same type of noise. Here's another thing that I feel extremely important to check at your 2,000 hour service, and that's the voltage regulator. On a lot of these Mercedes-Benz, they use a voltage regulator that bolts onto the back of the alternator, and it uses brushes, wearable brushes for the contact with the commutator. Now, I've done a number of videos on checking your voltage regulator. The one time I've been stranded on the freeway in a Mercedes-Benz because of this right here, the brushes will wear down to the point where they do not make contact, and suddenly all power in the car is lost, and you'll just get a very short warning before that happens. In one car, it was the wiper started to slow down. Now, here is a brand new regulator. Look at the difference in the length of the brushes. Now, this regulator probably has a little more life in it, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 miles. But I'm not going to chance it. I want to be able to put this on and plan to have this last for the next 2,000 hours of operation. If you need more information on how to install these in the newer model Mercedes-Benz, I do have video instructions on my website. But for my S500, at this point in its life, it's getting a new voltage regulator. Here's a close-up of the crank position sensor on this S500. It's held on with one bolt right to the bell housing. That's an E8. It's an E-Torx bolt head. And there's a wiring plug which you have to squeeze to lift off. So it's not hard to replace. It's just getting your hand back in behind that left cylinder head and getting down in there, get that bolt out. And this just comes right out and the new one goes right back in place. The new fan motor is installed and I reinstalled the entire fan assembly back into the engine compartment. And we're ready to roll this baby out the door.